The ADC meta will be on the move this patch, as we've got nerfs to runes and items that will influence the role. There are a bunch of mage item adjustments as well, and 15 different champions that will be directly changed. So let's get you guys set up with everything you need to know for 14.15 and a complete update on the solo queue tier list for every single role. And did you know mastering your champion will boost your win rate by a massive 9% on average? That's why at SkillCapped we offer Smurf commentaries. Simply select the champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching you how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. After that, take one of our 5 brand new courses that teach you the secrets to carrying as a top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD carry, and support. It doesn't stop there. We have new Season 14 courses on macro, wave control, trading, setting, and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, the list goes on. The best part, you can try all this out completely risk-free. Since if you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. Let's start the video off by looking at all the item changes and discussing which champions will be affected the most. Kraken Slayer is going to be nerfed, with its movement speed dropping from 7 to 5%, and its passive damage for ranged champs is also being nerfed. As if Tristana wasn't already in the gutter, she'll be getting even weaker with these changes. Kindred, Jinx, Uxin, Bel'Veth, Ashe, Xayah, Viego, and Yasuo are a few other champs who have been building Kraken very regularly that will be negatively affected. Jinx in particular has been performing better analytically in recent patches, rushing Infinity Edge, so now that Kraken is nerfed, we wouldn't be surprised if IE begins seeing a lot more play as a rush. Static Shiv is the other ADC item nerfed for this patch, as its movement speed is being reduced from 7 to 5%, and the cost of the item is going up by 100 gold. The biggest Shiv users from recent patches have been Zeri, Kai'Sa, and Sivir, and then after that, very few champs actually prioritize the item. Nerf will help bring Kai'Sa back down to earth, as she has been the highest priority ADC for solo queue over the past few patches. Fleet footwork adjustments will influence the strength of a plethora of champs for 14.15. The healing is nerfed early on in the game, however, Riot has stated that from level 14 onwards, the rune is buffed. This is really just a flat-out nerf though, because in a lot of games, you're not even going to reach level 14 when playing ADC. You may string together a few games in a row where they last super long and you benefit from this change, but over the course of 100 games, there's no way this adjustment ends up being net positive. Zeri is one champion in specific who should become much weaker for next patch because she's hurt by the Shiv and Fleet changes. A handful of other ADCs do have the ability to swap over to press the attack, so for someone like Jinx, she shouldn't be as bad off due to these nerfs. Lord Doms and Mortal Reminder are also getting nerfed for this patch, but the nerfs won't have as much of an impact compared to the Kraken and Shiv nerfs, just due to the fact you don't purchase Lord Doms and Mortal in every single game. The armor pen on Lord Doms is dropping from 40 to 35%. As for Mortal Reminder, Riot will be reducing the AD on the item from 40 to 35. It's not even really ADCs that will be impacted most by the Mortal Reminder nerf, as Garen and Gangplank are two champs who build Mortal Reminder more often than others, so they'll be feeling the effects of this one the most. If we move on to looking at the mage item changes now, Cosmic Drive is going to be buffed. Health on the item is going up by 100, while the movement speed from its passive is being increased as well. Vlad and Aurora were the two champs building Cosmic Drive the most in 14.14, so they'll be most positively impacted by these buffs. Many of the champs who used to build Rocket Belt kind of just dropped the item entirely because of how good Lich Bane has been this season, so Riot's looking to give Rocket Belt more priority in 14.15. Health on Rocket Belt is going up from 300 to 400. Kennen, Nico, Echo, and Fiddlesticks are 4 champs who will be liking this change the most. It feels like an eternity ago when Storm Surge controlled the meta, but it's been on the weaker side for a while now and getting buffed for 14.15. Passive bonus movement speed is being increased from 25 to 35%. The ranged passive damage proc is going up from 75 to 90%. Vlad is one champ who's going to gain the most amount of power from the mage item changes this patch, as he can slot Cosmic Drive and Storm Surge into his build. Very few other champs have been running Storm Surge as a priority purchase in recent patches, so we'll have to see if these buffs are enough to change that. When it comes down to a magic pen purchase, Void Staff has been completely overshadowed by Crypt Bloom this season, so Riot's trying to close the gap between the items a little more. They're doing this by buffing the AP on Void Staff, going from 90 to 95. Definitely not an overly impactful change, as it most likely does not shift the focus away from Crypt Bloom. Riot's throwing in one buff for fighter champs this patch, as they're buffing the armor on Death's Dance, going from 40 to 50. Definitely a more attractive pickup now in games where the enemy comp is heavy AD and you're playing a fighter champ. We had seen Death's Dance pop up a little bit on Neela as well in recent patches, so it will be interesting to see if priority comes back to that for 14.15. Another round of buffs to Dark Harvest are on the way, as Riot just reduced the cooldown of the rune from 45 to 40 seconds in 14.13, and they'll be going even further this patch, reducing the cooldown from 40 to 35 seconds. So 10 seconds off now in the span of a few patches, which does make Dark Harvest a lot more attractive on laners who have strong poke power and can consistently proc the rune in lane. There's a second buff as well with the on takedown cooldown cooldown of Dark Harvest being lowered from 1.5 to 1 second. Teemo, Vel'Koz, Lux, and Xerath are a few laners who have been performing pretty well with Dark Harvest in previous patches, so these buffs will increase the priority of the rune even more. So those are all the item and rune changes that will be live this patch, and with all that covered, let's head over to the top lane. Irelia is going to be adjusted as her base health is being increased from 590 to 630. Health regen is going down, however, from 8.5 to 6. This will be a buff for very early on in the lane and increase the level 2 all-in power of Irelia. However, as the lane drags out and the longer you stay in lane, the health regen nerf can outweigh the base health buff. For now, we'll be holding off on moving Irelia up the tier list as it's difficult to say how the changes will land exactly for the average player. The meta for top lane will be quite stable for another patch as we continue to rate Sett and Volibear as two of the most consistent top lane carries. Now, there are a few more champions that are played in the top lane who are being adjusted for this patch, but since top lane is not their main role, we'll be covering them in detail later on in the video. These champs include Skarner, Akali, Yone, Yasuo, and Cassiopeia. The only changes that we think could have a significant impact for top lane are the ones to Cass. Cass changes are definitely the most interesting for top lane because her base mana is going up early on and the cost of her E is being reduced. It's much easier for top lane Cass to take advantage of these buffs because she'll be up against melee champs more often and will be able to look for level 2 all-in plays more reliably. Definitely don't sleep on Cassio top for this patch as we do think she could emerge as one of the more under-the-radar picks, and we're moving her into the S tier. We just recently moved Shyvana up into the jungle OP tier, and immediately after that, Riot has decided to nerf her for 14.15. Base damage on E is going up, however, the total AD ratio is being swapped for a bonus AD ratio, and the AP ratio is being lowered. E in Dragon form is dropping as well, with a 30% AD ratio being swapped for a 50% bonus AD ratio, and the AP ratio is going down from 30 to 20%. The damage over time from E in Dragon form is also dropping as the 40% total AD ratio is being swapped for a 120% bonus AD ratio. Keep in mind, a bonus AD ratio is much less powerful than a total AD ratio, so even though the percent value is higher on the bonus AD ratio, it's still a nerf. Now, we do also have to take into account that fleet footwork is being nerfed for this patch too, and the rune has been a big reason to why Shyvana has been so good as of late. So with the direct nerfs combined with those fleet changes, we do see Shyvana losing a good chunk of power, and we'll be dropping her from OP into S. Skarner got absolutely hammered by his 14.13 nerfs, so Riot is revisiting the champ and giving him some power back for 14.15. Health growth of Skarner is going up from 105 to 110. Q mana cost will be lowered from 50 to 45. There's also a Q quality of life change that will be issued along with a quality of life change to Skarner's E to where it can no longer grab units behind Skarner. Considering Skarner has been a 46% win rate champ over the past 2 patches, these are extremely underwhelming changes and we won't be moving him up the tier list. We've got a new look to the jungle OP tier for this patch, as with Shyvana dropping down, we're going to be promoting Kha'Zix and Lilia. Lilia didn't end up losing very much power from her 14.14 nerf, so we're moving her back up into OP. As for Kha'Zix, he's been on the verge of OP for a while now, as he was directly buffed a few patches back, and now that Dark Harvest has been buffed multiple times, that's been really good for him too. Kindred and Graves are likely to lose a little bit of power this patch, as the Kraken nerfs affect Kindred while the Fleet nerfs hit Graves. We won't move them down the tier list for now though, as it's hard to say exactly how impactful those indirect nerfs will be. Dark Harvest changes will give a small boost in power to a bunch of junglers, but we definitely think the buffs to the rune are more skewed towards helping laners than junglers. Mid lane is the role with the most amount of champion changes for 14.15, so let's dive right into them, starting with Yasuo. Now, keep in mind, Yasuo is negatively impacted by the Fleet and Kraken nerfs, so even though he's getting directly buffed, he won't be gaining as much power as you may think. E damage will be increased as the base value is going from 60 scaling to 100 to 70 scaling to 130. Stack scaling on E is buffed, going from 15 scaling to 25% to just a flat 25%. Base armor is also going up from 30 to 32. So without question, Yasuo's early game all-in strength does become stronger for next patch. If you're a good Yasuo player who can capitalize on openings consistently, then even with the nerfs to Kraken and Fleet, we could see the champ coming out of the patch better off. With that said, Fleet losing early sustain will hurt the champ in more difficult matchups, as gaining damage doesn't really matter if you can't actually trade consistently. We're leaning more towards the changes being relatively neutral on the grand scale, so we won't be shifting Yasuo's tier list placement for now. Who knows how impactful this Talon buff is going to be, as Riot has stated they are changing his Q so that it now always dashes to targets. Does this mean his Q would sometimes not actually work in previous patches? We're not exactly sure, but maybe if you're a Talon main and know more about this, you could let us know in the comments below. No change to Talon's tier list placement for now, as we're not sure at all how impactful the buff will actually be. Riot's not wasting any time at all in issuing nerfs to Aurora, as she has landed in quite a powerful spot for a new champion. Passive base movement speed is going down, and the bonus movement speed per spirit is being changed from a flat 5% to 2% plus 3% per 100 AP. A quality of life change is being issued to Q2 2 so that it no longer misses its original target. W will also be getting a quality of life change so that invis breaking on auto attacks now happens on launch attack instead of pre-attack, so you won't accidentally uninvis by starting and canceling an attack. W cooldown is being changed from 18 scaling to 14 seconds to 20 scaling to 16 seconds. E jump back range is being changed from 800 to 150 plus 2 times your movement speed. R is getting a few quality of life changes and will also be getting some damage nerfs, as the base damage on R is dropping from 250 scaling to 500 to 200 scaling to 450. R AP ratio is down as well from 65 to 60%. So considering Aurora is still very new and players have yet to fully optimize the pick, we don't think she'll actually be that much weaker this patch as a result of these nerfs. If you just look at the average win rate of Aurora in 14.14, it doesn't give you a true picture of her strength, because as the patch rolled along and players became more accustomed to the pick, her win rate rose a ton. Looking at day-by-day win rates gives us a better idea of where Aurora is at, and towards the end of the patch, she was winning over 53% of the time in Diamond and above. Riot likely picked up on this data as well, and it's the reason to why Aurora is being nerfed, even though you may not think she's nerf-worthy based on her average win rate from the patch. We had Aurora placed in the A tier for 14.14, and we probably could have even had her in the S tier with how well she progressed throughout the patch. So with these nerfs going live, we see A tier being a good fit. Riot overshot with the 14.14 Aurelian Soul adjustments, so they are toning him down a notch for 14.15. Q mana cost is going up from 30 scaling to 50 to 35 scaling to 55. W base range is being lowered from 1500 scaling to 1900 to just a flat 1500. E mana cost takes a hit as well, going from 80 to 90. So 3 flat out nerfs to Soul for next patch, and as a result, we will be moving him back down the mid lane tier list, going from S into A. The Cassiopeia adjustments are ones that we are pretty excited to see how they play out, as Riot's putting more power back into her early laning in exchange for a weaker late game. Base mana is going up from 350 to 400, however, mana per level is down from 60 to 40. This means that up until level 4, you will now have more mana than before, but level 4 onwards, you'll have less. Q mana cost is dropping from 50 scaling to 90 to 50 scaling to 70. W mana cost is also going down from 70 scaling to 110 to 70 scaling to 90. E change is pretty massive, as mana cost is being reduced from 50 scaling to 42 to a flat 40 at all ranks. So with more base mana and now with E costing 10 mana less, the level 2 all-in strength of Cassio does become significantly more threatening for 14.15. Damage has never been an issue for Cass. It's always been whether or not she can kill her enemy before she runs out of mana, so these changes are huge to combat that weakness. We do have 2 later game damage nerfs to compensate for all the buffs, as Q AP ratio is going down from 90 to 70%, while E AP ratio is being lowered from 60 to 55%. Even though the changes may not move Cassio's overall win rate, the fact that you'll now have more agency over the early game and actually be able to look for all-in plays more consistently should make the champ way more fun to play. We can definitely see a world where the changes are net positive and Cass becomes OP, but we'll be keeping her in S tier for now and adjust accordingly for the mid-patch update if need be. Power is going to be shifted around in Akali's kit for 14.15, as her R1 damage is being changed from 80 scaling to 360 to 110 scaling to 330. R2 damage is going up by 10 at all ranks. R cooldown is nerfed though, as it's being increased by 20 seconds at rank 1. W cooldown will be buffed, going from 20 flat to 20 scaling to 16 seconds. So level 6 all-in power of Akali does become stronger. However, you won't have access to your R as often. With the W buff thrown in there as well, we could see the changes landing net positive, but we don't see them being enough to alter Akali's tier list placement. Yone's level 9 power spike is going to become stronger for this patch, as Riot will be increasing his Q damage at max rank from 100 to 120. For a spell on such a short cooldown, 20 added damage is actually quite big. To compensate for this buff though, R cooldown is going to be nerfed, but only later on in the game, as it stays the same at rank 1, but is being increased by 20 seconds at max rank. Since the Q buff is going to come into play in every single game, whereas the R nerf may not, we actually see these changes being more positively skewed. With that in mind, Yone does suffer from the fleet nerf, so this is something to take into account when considering his overall strength for 14.15. We really think the 20 added damage at max rank in Q is quite big though, and should outweigh all the other nerfs, so we're giving Yone a push up from B to A tier. The Z changes are very similar to what we just saw for Yone, as Q damage is going up at max rank, however the bonus AD ratio on Q is dropping. R cooldown will be increased. We wouldn't be surprised if these adjustments do skew more positively, however, we can't see them being enough to warrant a push into OP tier for Zed, so we're going to be leaving him in S. Even though these Silas changes will be listed as adjustments in the patch notes, we do believe that they will turn out as net nerfs. Q cooldown is being lowered by 1 second at all ranks, however, Q base damage and AP ratio are both being reduced. E2 AP ratio is nerfed, going from 100 to 80%. W heal ratio is being adjusted, as instead of a 35% AP ratio, it's now going to be a 20% AP ratio, along with a 5% 1% bonus health ratio. W damage AP ratio is lowered from 80 to 70%, so ratios on Sylas Q, E, and W are all being nerfed for this patch, which will hurt his mid-game spike. With the ratio nerfs along with W now scaling off of health, we'll likely see Rod of Ages make a comeback for this patch. Cosmic Drive buff is quite interesting as well because its health is being increased, which will give it a better synergy with Sylas W. A Rod with Cosmic Drive core is one to watch for this patch, as the Lich Bane with Shadow Flame build definitely becomes weaker. Overall, we do see Sylas losing strength for 14.15, so we're dropping him from S into A tier. So with many of the mid lane changes being adjustments and just power shifting around in champions kits instead of flat out buffs or nerfs, the meta won't look that much different. OP tier will remain the same as last patch, with Nefiri and Vex on top. Vlad is a champ to watch for this patch because he is someone who can build Storm Surge and Cosmic Drive, so with both those items buffed, he should gain more power than most off of the item buffs. We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on the strength of Dark Harvest on certain mid laners as well. Lux and Xerath have already been performing pretty well with Dark Harvest in recent patches, but the popularity of the rune has remained quite low, especially for the lower ranks where games on average last longer. Dark Harvest may end up being the most optimal keystone for Lux and Xerath moving forward. Since Riot's going heavier on the item changes to nerf ADCs this patch, we don't have a ton of champions that will be directly changed for the role, but one who will be is Varus. It looks like Riot is putting more power back into Q max Varus for this patch while taking away from W. Base AD is going up from 57 to 59. W on hit damage falls off a cliff at max rank as it's dropping from 35 to 25. Passive minion attack speed is being increased at level 7 and level 13. AD and AP that you can get from the champion takedowns is now going to scale off 25% of your attack speed instead of 15%. Champion takedown passive attack speed cap is being increased from 2.76 to 3. So in the grand scheme of things, we don't really see these changes being enough to significantly boost Varus' strength for solo queue. Varus has been hovering around a 46% win rate during 14.14, and we can't see that going up very much due to these changes, so we'll be leaving him in the C tier. Ezreal has been one of the better ADCs in recent patches, so his QAD ratio will be reduced by a solid amount for the next patch, dropping from 140 to 130%. For now, we'll be moving Ezreal from S into A tier, but there is a chance that we'll have to move him further down into B for mid-patch, depending on how the rest of the meta unfolds due to the item nerfs. So for the complete ADC tier list, things are going to be looking quite a bit different for this patch. Two champions who should gain in priority a significant amount and who we are moving into OP tier for 14.15 are Miss Fortune and Draven. Draven and MF, being Bloodthirster rushers who don't use Fleet for their keystone rune, will become indirectly stronger as many other ADCs fall down due to the Kraken, Shiv, and Fleet nerfs. Over the past patch, Miss Fortune and Draven have been right in behind the likes of Jinx and Kai'Sa power-wise, so they get the bump due to both Jinx and Kai'Sa dropping down. Twitch is another ADC that should be prioritized a lot more moving forward, as he's not affected by any of the changes either and is being moved into S. Zeri is being handed the short end of the stick for this patch, as she's one of a few ADCs who's hurt by both the Fleet and item changes. As a result, we're dropping Zeri down into the B tier. Lucian, being an ADC who does not rely on Kraken or Fleet, is getting a push out of B and into A tier. The meta build on Lucian right now consists of him rushing Essence Reaver, going into Flicker Blade second, and then IE third. Definitely look to try this build out instead of Kraken this patch if you intend on picking Lucian. It's an extremely light patch for the support role, as we only have one champion getting directly adjusted. Leona has been the most OP support for a while now, so she's going to be losing damage on her passive, as it's dropping from 32 scaling to 168 to 32 scaling to 151. W damage is nerfed as well, going from 55 scaling to 195 to 55 scaling to 175. Definitely not the end of the world for Leona, as these are more mid-game nerfs, while Leona's early game does not get affected much at all. If Riot were to have nerfed passive and W damage early on, then we'd have a different story, but we only see these changes being enough to push Leona out of OP tier and into S. So with Leona being the only support change, the OP tier now consists of just Poppy and Nami. A bunch of enchanters have been seeing a lot more success over the past patch, most notably Melio and Seraphine. Melio was given those adjustments last patch, and they've actually turned out quite positive. Nothing too crazy, as the champ's win rate has only gone up about 0.5%, but it's enough to push Melio up in priority over many other enchanters, as he's going to be in the S tier for 14.15. Seraphine is the other enchanter who has been on the rise. It's because of this new build that revolves around Solstice Slay, Echoes of Helia, and Moonstone, which just provides a crazy amount of healing. We'll go into more detail on Seraphine during the solo carry and OP builds video for this patch. Meta is definitely starting to slowly shift back into the favor of enchanters, with Warmog's nerfed last patch and Leona now nerfed for 14.15. There's honestly just a good mix of both melee supports and enchanters that you can play, which is really nice because previous to last patch, if you weren't playing a melee support, you were kind of trolling. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 14.15 15 update on the solo queue tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you back soon.